We welcome you to another Sunday School lesson. Sunday School is a gift from God. King David was never able to see his main desire become a reality. He wanted to build a great temple for his God. Instead, God told David that his seed would be the one to build him a temple. Nonetheless, David made preparations for Solomon to build the temple by stockpiling materials for its construction. In addition, David bought the land that the temple was to build on from Ornan. The land was located in the mountain range of Mount Moriah, the same place where God sent Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac before he stopped it. 1 Kings chapters 5-7 give details of Solomon's work of building and furnishing the temple of God in Jerusalem, as well as his palace. Our lesson begins with chapter 8, after Solomon's palace and the temple were finished, as they prepare to move the Ark of the Covenant from the tent David prepared, to its place in the temple and then dedicate the temple. Verse 1 says, Then King Solomon summoned into his presence at Jerusalem the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the chiefs of the Israelite families, to bring up the Ark of the Lord's covenant from Zion, the city of David. When the temple was finally finished, Solomon brought all the items that David had gathered to put in the temple. There was only one thing left for Solomon to do: bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord out of the city of Zion into the temple which was located outside the city. Solomon summoned all the heads of the 12 tribes and related clans or families for the purpose of transferring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord to the completed temple from the tabernacle that David had set up in Jerusalem. Under the reign of David, the Ark was brought to Jerusalem and placed in a tent that David had erected for it. Verse 2 says, All the Israelites came together to King Solomon at the time of the festival in the month of Ethanim, the 7th month. In addition to bringing the ark to the temple, this occasion would also serve to dedicate the temple. This assembly took place at the feast in the month Ethanim. The feast referred to here is the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths. God gave it this name because he made the children of Israel dwell in booths, when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. It was observed in the month Ethanim, which was the 7th month on the Hebrew religious calendar. Ethanim correlates to our September-October. This feast and dedication of the temple took place a year after the temple was completed. Verse 3 says, When all the elders of Israel had arrived, the priests took up the ark. Again, all the elders of Israel came as Solomon commanded, but it is also added that the priests carried the ark. The priests refer to the sons of Kohat, who were descendants of Levi and therefore were priests. It had to be carried on their shoulders using the 2 poles going through the 4 rings on the ark. Failure to carry the ark the way God prescribed would lead to his judgment. Verse 4 says, And they brought up the ark of the Lord and the tent of meeting and all the sacred furnishings in it. The priests and Levites carried them up. Once the priests positioned the ark to carry it on their shoulders by the 2 poles, all the leaders brought up the ark of the Lord, and the tabernacle of the congregation. In the wilderness wanderings, God had instructed Moses that all the things pertaining to the tabernacle were to be cared for by the priests and Levites. Therefore, not only did the priests and Levites bring up the ark of the Lord, and the tabernacle of the congregation from their previous locations, they also brought along all the holy vessels that were in the tabernacle. This refers to all the furnishings that Solomon made according to the instructions he received from his father David. Verse 5 says, And King Solomon and the entire assembly of Israel that had gathered about him were before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and cattle that they could not be recorded or counted. Once this large congregation of Israel reached the temple location, they gathered close to Solomon before the ark. They were sacrificing sheep and oxen just as sacrifices were offered at the dedication of the first tabernacle, and also when David offered sacrifices after every 6 steps taken, by the priests as they carried the ark from Obed-Edom's home to Jerusalem. So many animals were being sacrificed that no one could count them. Verse 6 says, The priests then brought the ark of the Lord's covenant to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place, and put it beneath the wings of the cherubim. As the procession approached the temple, the priests brought in the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord to its place. The particular location of the ark was in the inner sanctuary. Within the inner sanctuary, the ark would be placed in the most holy place, under the wings of the cherubims. The most holy place, often referred to as the Holy of Holies, was the innermost part of the temple and was behind the second curtain in the temple. The area in front of this second curtain was the holy place where the priests conducted their daily service in the temple. No one was allowed to enter the most holy place daily, not even the high priest. However, only the high priest could enter the most holy place where the ark was, once a year on the Day of Atonement. Once the ark was placed in its proper place, it would be under the wings of the cherubims. On both ends of the mercy seat of the ark were two mounted cherubims or angels. But the cherubims mentioned here were larger and stood alone with their wings hovering over the ark. They were made of gold and their positioning symbolized guarding the ark. Moving the ark into its permanent place in the temple, symbolized God's continued and faithful presence with Israel. Verse 7 says, "The cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark and overshadowed the ark and its carrying poles." Still describing the image the cherubims presented, here they are said to spread their two wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubims covered the ark and the poles. As noted in verse 6, these cherubims stood opposite each other with their wings hovering over the ark and the carrying poles. The poles of the ark were removed and placed so that they could be seen from under the wings of the cherubim, to direct the high priest to the mercy seat over the ark when he went in once a year to sprinkle the blood of atonement there. So, the poles still served a purpose, although they would no longer be needed to carry the ark since it would not be moved again. Verse 8 says, "These poles were so long that their ends could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but not from outside the holy place, and they are still there today." Once the ark was put in place, the priests drew out the poles which were so long that the ends of the poles could be seen from the holy place, the area in front of the most holy place, that was in front of the oracle or inner sanctuary. However, they could not be seen from the outer court. The last part of this verse says the poles are in this position as of the date of this writing, before the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. Verse 9 says, "There was nothing in the ark except the two stone tablets that Moses had placed in it at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites after they came out of Egypt." When the ark was finally set in its proper place in the most holy part of the temple, the writer reveals that there was nothing in the ark except the two tables of stone, which Moses put there at Horeb. After leaving Egypt and wandering in the wilderness, the ark contained Aaron's rod that budded, a pot of manna, and the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments. However, by the time of the dedication of the temple, the pot of manna and Aaron's rod were missing from inside the ark. It's possible that the Philistines may have removed these items when they took the ark in a battle with Israel. Now, at this dedication of the temple, the ark only contained the two tables of stone, which Moses put there at Horeb, when the Lord made a covenant with the children of Israel, when they came out of the land of Egypt. Mount Horeb, also called Mount Sinai, was where God gave Moses the 10 Commandments and made a covenant with the children of Israel. This was the Mosaic covenant God made with Israel after bringing them out of the land of Egypt. Verse 10 says, "When the priests withdrew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord." As this dedication service continued, the priests came out of the holy place where they conducted their daily temple service. At that time, the cloud filled the house of the Lord. This was the cloud that indicated God's presence. It first appeared to Israel during their wilderness wanderings when they were guided by a pillar of a cloud as they traveled during the daytime. This cloud also filled the first tabernacle when it was dedicated, and remained over it by day throughout Israel's wilderness wanderings. Verse 11 says, "And the priests could not perform their service because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled his temple." It was the priest's duty to take care of the temple service. But at this time, the priests could not do their priestly duties in the temple because of the presence of the cloud. Moses had a similar experience when he was prevented from entering the tent of the tabernacle in the wilderness because the glory of the Lord came down and filled it. Here, the presence of the cloud revealed that the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. God's glory as seen by the cloud was so immense that the priests couldn't perform their duties. There was no doubt that God was present among his people in the temple. Verse 12 says, "Then Solomon said, the Lord has said that he would dwell in a dark cloud." In these passages, there are many similarities to the Israelites and their experiences in the wilderness. When the priests may have been in awe when they saw the thick cloud, Solomon spoke these words to silence any fears they may have had. With his words, Solomon reminds the priests of something that they may not have known, that this thick darkness caused by the cloud filling the temple was a token of God's presence. When King Solomon spoke the words, "The Lord said that he would dwell in the thick darkness," he may have been reminded of Moses' words in Deuteronomy 5:22, "These words the Lord spake unto all your assembly in the mount out of the midst of the fire, of the cloud, and of the thick darkness, with a great voice," and he added no more. "And he wrote them in 2 tables of stone, and delivered them unto me." It was important for not only the priests, but for all Israel to know that God can be present with his people even in the thick darkness. Verse 13 says, "I have indeed built a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to dwell forever." No doubt at this moment, Solomon was reminded of God's promise to David that his son, not David, would build him a house. So, Solomon says to the Lord, "I have surely built thee an house to dwell in, a settled place for thee to abide in forever." God had once again proven himself to be a faithful promise keeper. David's son had built God a house to dwell. As far as Solomon was concerned, this house was entirely God's own. This house, unlike the tabernacle, was now, as Solomon continued to say, a settled place for you to abide in forever. Since the temple was God's own house, it should never be alienated nor converted to any other use. Unfortunately, because of Israel's sins, later during the time of Jesus, the temple was no longer a house of prayer, it had become a den of thieves. But one day those who come out of the great tribulation with their sins forgiven will serve God day and night, in the heavenly temple, and God will dwell among them. Key verse: "I have indeed built a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to dwell forever." 1 Kings 8:13. Israel endured many times of instability, wandering in the wilderness, warring with other tribes, changing leadership during the time of the judges, warring during the times of Saul and David. Now they had peace, their own land, and a strong king. They only needed their God to dwell among them. With this temple dedication, God's ark representing his presence finally had a permanent residence among them. As the Church of Jesus Christ, we have no such ark, but we have something that Israel didn't have. We have the presence of God with us constantly because we are the temple of the Holy Spirit who indwells us, and will continue to do so until the day of redemption. Knowing this, ought to encourage us to live like him, to praise and worship our gracious God all the time. Thought to remember: God still chooses to live among his people. The Ark of the Covenant was the place of presence. While the Lord was present among the Israelites in the Exodus, he localized his presence in the tabernacle for the benefit of his sinful people. The infinite God, who is not constrained by time and space, made concessions to the weakness of his people and became manifest for their benefit in one location. He is everywhere, but he chose to be there in a box for them. What a God we have! What a God has us! He chose to humble himself for the sake of his wandering people in the wilderness. Even more, he chose to humble himself for us in his Son, Jesus Christ, and then he stooped very low by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Philippians 2:8. The fact that the ark was the place of the Lord's presence among his people, brought great assurance to the Israelites. Thankfully, Christians believe that God is not far off in another land, but he is near to us who are sinners. Now the God who told his old covenant people, "I will dwell in your midst," now tells us that Christians are the true tabernacle, the dwelling place of God under the new covenant. Ephesians 2:22. Our lesson next week is entitled, Solomon Speaks to the People. Our biblical reference is 1 Kings 8:14, 21. We are truly glad you spent time to learn this week's lesson with us. We hope you are blessed and may share these with somebody else. We wish you can join us at the Cubao Church of Christ soon. Our congregation is a place to discover faith, find new friends, grow closer relationship with Christ and serve with each other's gifts. Thank you very much, have a great week, and God bless you always, dear brothers and sisters.